Welcome to the Flex Rental Solutions webinar for today. This is Tuesday, September 30th. Today we're going to talk about workflow. We're going to show how to create a simple notification through your workflow. But I'm also going to go through and just talk about a lot of the different workflow terms that we use and just kind of how the different workflows work for your different financial documents. So I've created a test quote here, webinar workflow training. Most of you probably have, when you create a quote, it will start in inquiry status. At least when we ship Flex to you, that's how it's defaulted. Of course, that is customizable. When you start a quote, you can have that be in any status you want, but we've started here in inquiry status. In each status that you are in, you have different workflow options over here in the Workbench menu on the right-hand side of the screen. So from inquiry status, I can either cancel the quote, set it to tentative, or I can confirm the quote. To give you a good visual example of what's happening here, that was in the projects menu and then workflow, and then we're going to look at quote workflow. And let's look at the inquiry workflow. So first of all, just a couple of definitions. The first is a workflow state. A workflow state are the names that you see over here, and those correspond with the statuses. So the inquiry state, of course, will correspond with the inquiry status. And you can adjust and edit the different options that come with a status on the System Settings menu and Status Options. So we see here that inquiry does not create conflicts, it's not a closed status or locked. You can change the colors that appear on your calendar, etc. We have a few people that aren't hearing anything in the chat room. Can I just get another confirmation that some of you are hearing me? Okay. If somebody could just remind those viewers to click the phone icon and join via phone or via internet, that would be great. So yes, each workflow state corresponds with a workflow status. And then the options that you had when you were there in the quote are what we call workflow actions. So when you're in the inquiry status, the different workflow actions were to cancel, confirm, or set to tentative. So those are what we call workflow actions. Each workflow action can have various attributes set up for that. So in this example, this workflow action to set to tentative from inquiry, the source state is inquiry, the target state is tentative. You can chain some parent or child actions to that. So for example, if there are parent documents associated with the quote, then you can chain workflow actions to happen to those parent documents. Same with child actions. But we're not going to focus on those for this lesson. One thing that I do want to focus on, though, is the outflow jobs. So within each workflow action, you can also set up a workflow job. In this case, the workflow job is sending out this email notification that the quote has been set to tentative. So again, we have a workflow state, which is tied to the status, which is we're looking at inquiry. Then you have workflow actions. So when you click on those actions within a quote, these things will happen. And then we have workflow jobs, which are things that are triggered as you go through a workflow action. So if we go and hit set to tentative, this is the workflow job. It's sending out that email notification. And you can change who that's being sent to. So now that is taking us into the tentative status. And that gives us some new workflow options. We can reset it to inquiry, we can confirm it, we can cancel it. And again, just as a visual, if we go to the quote workflow and look at tentative, then you can see the actions are to reset to inquiry, confirm, or cancel. So let's go through to confirm this quote. We won't send that email out just yet. And so now the example that we wanted to show is to how to set up a new workflow action that will work as sort of a notification email that gets sent out if anybody makes changes to this quote. A lot of times we have customers say that that somebody will make a change to the quote, but then they forget to update the pull sheet or update the invoice. So there's changes on the quote. The pricing might be different on the quote, but that doesn't get pushed to the other documents because maybe the account manager didn't know that changes were made to the quote. Maybe the warehouse manager made a change to it. Of course, it varies depending on how your company runs. Maybe you don't give warehouse managers permissions, but that's kind of the beauty of Flex, is that every company runs a little bit differently, and so we can set up these different options to work with the way that your company works. So in this case, let's create a pull sheet. And what happens here is when you hit create a pull sheet, the quote stays in confirmed status, but the only workflow job was to create this pull sheet. So now let's say that somebody comes in and says, well, I wanted to add a few of these items to the quote, but they aren't going to inform the account manager that they did that because they don't have any way to do that within Flex right now. So let's go back and set up that inform whoever of a notification of changes. So we will go to the confirmed status. And again, for those of you who might have come in late, you find that in the projects menu. Then you click workflow, double click quote workflow, then double click confirmed. And again, since we're in confirmed status in this quote, the workflow actions that we see here are the same workflow actions that we're going to see in the outflow here for the confirmed status. So what we're going to do is set up a new workflow action. We're going to call this notify of changes. Typically, if you're going to send an email template notification as a workflow job, you probably don't need the confirm screen enabled because as you click send or OK on the workflow job to send, that's kind of your confirmation. So in this case, we're not going to change the source or the target state because we're not trying to get the quote into a new state. All we're doing here is firing an outflow job that says there have been changes made to this quote. So what we have to do now is go to Projects, Workflow Jobs, and we're going to create a new email notification. You're probably familiar with some of the notifications that are already set up. The quote confirmed, so when you go to quote confirmed status, this is the email notification that gets sent out. And of course, this is where you would go to change the email addresses that receive that notification, or you can change the wording of that email. So what I'm going to do is, and you can do this in several different places, you can, back on the Workflow Jobs tab, you can click New Simple Email Notification, or you might have noticed from the quote confirmed notification, you can click New Simple Email Notification here. I'm essentially going to copy and paste most of the message and subject except change one thing. And the reason I do this is because we have a lot of different tokens here that might be kind of difficult to just type out on my own. So this will pull up the client name, the contact, the quote number, etc. So copying and pasting is a lot easier, and then just changing the small details. Like in this case, it's going to be a notification that the quote has been changed instead of confirmed. We'll do the same with the subject line. Copy and paste and just say that it has been changed. The to addresses can either be individual email addresses, people within your company, or you can set up an email group, not within Flex, but with whatever email provider you're using. So maybe you have something like account managers at your company name, or something like that. The from address, that's typically when we're sending these internal notifications. Since they're not going to the client, they typically will just come from the no reply email so that you know that it's from Flex. And then of course the last thing we have to do is just give it a name. So let's call this quote changed. Oh, we'll give it a code. So we just created the email notification workflow job to inform people that changes have been made to the quote. So let's reload this and find we might actually have to quickly create this and then close it and open it. A lot of times I like to work backwards, so I would have created that email notification job first so that when I go to create the new workflow action, that job would be there to choose. So on the outflow jobs, I will choose quote changed, then click add, and then update. So now within my confirmed workflow path, I now have a notify of changes workflow action. That workflow action is not changing the status or state, it's keeping it in confirmed. All it's doing is sending out this outflow job of an email notification that says this quote has been changed. So if we go back to the quote and let's reload it so that we can see that new workflow action. So again, earlier I put on a new item onto this quote. After I do that, I would go over and click Notify of Changes. It's going to send to that email group that I set up with the subject of this quote has been changed. It will say who it's been changed by. And there we go. So the status hasn't been changed. All it did was send that email notification that things have been changed. At which point the account manager or warehouse manager or whoever will come in and update the pull sheet, update the invoice, or do whatever they have to do. So that's just one of the many workflow actions that you can set up. I've seen some Flex customers that have many different workflow actions set up. Maybe from quote, they're going to have something like submit for approval to operations manager or something like that. Just a lot of different workflow actions that you can set up. This is just one of the simple ones that we can do. Hopefully it will get you off to a good start though, so that you can learn how to set up some more workflow actions on your own. If you have any questions, please email support@flexrentalsolutions.com.